is in. Wiring is pretty much good to go. Few things left to do. I gotta put the transmission oil pan on, do all the fluid, do some last checks, tie some stuff up, make sure it won't melt from getting hot, and then we're gonna fire it up. We're gonna see what happens here. So we'll see what we gotta do. Alright, so next up we got the oil filter. We're going to get that on. After that, underneath the truck here, the whole thing, we're pretty much done down here. Transmission oil pan's on, exhaust is on. Everything else is looking pretty good. So then we'll start filling up with fluids. Alright, so the goal right now is to get the engine running. So we gotta make sure the spark plug wires are okay, get the oil in there, coolant, transmission fluid, the whole 9 yards. Make sure everything's wired up correctly, make sure we're not gonna burn anything, and we'll get started up. We'll be good to go. Let's do it. So of course, as soon as I threw rad fluid in the radiator there, the bottom hose is leaking. So we'll have to sort out what's going on down there. Probably just not sealed properly. Okay, although this is a HEMI distributor, I think it's from a 392 where the distributor is at the front of the engine here. So the spark plug cables are wrong in length, not going to work out. We actually had to just throw this guy on there when we were testing the engine. So we are going to be making a new set of spark plug wires here. Tailor-made wires. They got the HEMI tips on them. So we'll just cut them down to length, crimp the ends on, and get it all wired up. Okay, so spark plug cables. There's two different types of spark plug cables. There's the copper core wire cable, which is this style here that actually has the wires inside of it. Mainly used for racing applications because it causes interference with electronic components like radio and everything. And then the other type is the spiral core wire, which is this one here, which is actually fiberglass strands wrapped with carbon and with a fine wire around it. There's other types also, there's resistance core and there's whatever, but these are the main two types. So to actually make the cable, the first step is to measure with the old cable compared to the new one. Mark out where the end length of it there, and then the first most important step is to get the boot onto the cable. Every time I make spark plug cables, I always forget about getting the boot on there, and have to go back, cut the end off, and redo it. So once you have your mark, so if this is the cut line here, then you want to get the boot on there first before. I mean, you can cut it close to it. But the reason is you want to be able to grab the end of the cable with some needle nose pliers to pull it through the boot, and you want to be able to cut that tip off that you could be potentially damaging by grabbing it with the needle nose there. So you know, cut it fairly close, so where the cut line is. Grab some dry silicone spray and get some on the wire, some in the boot, and then you just want to push it in to here. So you can see the tip of the wire in the boot there. And you just want to grab onto it really good and just pull it through like that. So I kind of erased the cut line a little bit. I can see it still is right there, but you can always just re-measure against the wire to make sure you're in the on the right location, or if there's markings, read where the markings are. Now, to actually put the tip on, what you want to do is get the wire and you want to fold it back on there so that when this is on, the tip of the wire is just underneath where the tip is. So you'll get the hang of it. You kind of got to use some sort of reference for that length. The one that I've been using is basically the width of the blade part of this is about where I need to be. So I just go like that. Now, you don't want to damage that inside wire, so just roll around the end of the wire with it, and you can get a good feel of where to stop. Okay, then the light cut on the top usually helps a little bit, and then it just pops off like that, right? So you'll see what I mean here. So then you fold this back onto there, and then when this is on there, it's going to be just covering where the tip of that is, because you don't want to have it sticking out, because then it'll can cause misfires and everything. So that's kind of where you want to be. You want to be so this is the factory one, so you want to have it sticking out a little bit, right, with the crimp fully engaging the wire nice and tight like that, right? So easiest way to do it is with a set of these. They're not too expensive. Just go out and grab them. So that's where the terminal, the W crimp is there. So this will sit in here now. See how it doesn't quite fit in there? So you got to kind of pinch it together a little bit beforehand. Give it a little bit like that. So a little bit too much. Okay, so now fold back the core of the wire there, and then just get the tip on there. Make sure it's nice and tight. Make sure the wires, the core of the wire is folded back really good in there. And grab the crimpers, and you just want to take your time and just get a nice solid crimp onto the wire there, and go down a little. So you want to do 2 so that it's fully crimped on there. Okay, so that's the end result there. I might have squeezed a little bit too hard with the crimpers and squished it a little bit, but it's fully engaged. The core's folded back really nicely. So then once that's all on there, you just want to slide the boot over the end of it there, and you can see in there, nice, nicely done end. So just things to remember: always get the boot on there first. When you're cutting, you get a reference point and just slowly work your way around the core of the wire like that, and it should pull off pretty easily. You'll get the hang of it when you're moving. I suggest doing a few cuts, because what you want to avoid is what I just did right there, where you cut the core of the wire. Want to work really carefully and make sure you don't damage the core, otherwise it can lead to misfires and you'll be chasing down a lot of problems. So yeah, I'm going to finish up the rest of the wires on the truck and get them installed. Alright, so what I'm going to do, because this distributor cap is off the different HEMI, I'm going to follow each wire, mark them an approximate length with a marker there. I'm going to take them off. I've already got the distributor marked with which cylinder number is which. So just putting them back in, we'll just follow the routing path and install everything. We'll be good to go. Alright, so we got the new spark plug wires routed correctly, looking good. Alright, so I think we're ready to fire this thing up. So what we're going to do is, spark plugs are out right now. We're going to roll the engine over a few times, get the oil flowing. Then we'll check on the oil pressure gauge we got here to make sure that we're getting some oil pressure going. This is a temporary gauge that's plugged into the back there. Yeah, after that, once we roll the engine over, get the oil flowing in it and everything, throw the spark plug back in, put some gas in the tank, and we should be good to go. Get it going. Let's fire this thing up.
You got fuel here, right?
Alright, let's turn it over. Let's see what happens. I think we're good. I hope we're good. When I was first going through the motions of getting the truck started up, John came by to give me a hand, and after rewiring the whole truck, it became apparent I still had some electrical gremlins to work out. So when I first turned the key to the on position, my windshield washer pump was constantly on. So we chased that one down and we just went over everything, chased down a few more electrical gremlins, and went through a few attempts to get the engine fired up. So this was attempt number 1. Okay. Moment of truth. Ready?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Hey?
Nothing.
You got your battery hooked up.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll find out.
Your key is coming right to here too, right? So.
Yeah. Here. It should be all there.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll click it to start. You want to just leave the yellow? I don't think it's actually. I don't know what's touching it there.
Okay. Nothing.
Huh?
Nothing.
Nothing there, eh? Okay,
Nothing.
that's probably the problem then.
Hey? Okay, you want to try it again?
Yeah, you ready? Alright, what's that click now?
Your signal light.
The wiring issue that I was having was related to the park/neutral switch.
Okay.
It's faulty, so once we figured that out, I jumped that connection and started getting the starter to rotate. Once the starter was rotating, we put the spark plugs back in again and fed the car some fuel and actually got the engine to fire up.
Well, you gotta have it running before you do the timing light. Okay.
Alright, ready?
Yeah. Leaky gas.
Once the engine was turning over, we connected the fuel line and immediately found 2 leaks. One was up at the carb and one was down at the fuel line from the fuel pump. So we stopped right away, sorted out the 2 leaks, and continued to work through the troubleshooting process.
Really well done.
Turn her over and see. So I'm gonna get the light.
Everything out of the way?
No, I'm just waiting to make sure. Okay?
Ready?
Yeah. Okay, I'm out of gas as far as it's not leak. Oh, okay.
Let me know.
Yep. Fire.
You ready?
Yep. Okay, again. Okay, then.
Getting there.
Full.
Alright.
Got a few issues. Better solve these fuel issues first before you fire.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's better. No use fooling around with that. Okay.
Cool.
So you got a little tighter for you. We know it runs. It did run.
Yeah.
I didn't want to keep. I didn't want to. I couldn't remain.
Alright. We've got it running. Sounds really good. A few minor problems we got going on. First one is a couple fuel leaks. The one flare at the bottom, down at the fuel pump there. That one was leaking. We got that sorted out now. The other one is up here at the carburetor underneath. Seems to be a fuel leak there. When it's running, it sounds like it's sucking air in also. So I'll have to take the carb off, redo that seal, and make sure we're not leaking up there anymore. But we have good oil pressure. The timing's getting there. It's still a little bit off. But we kind of have to have the whole thing running properly before we can really set that and do all the vacuum advance and everything. But very excited, very exciting day. We got everything done we wanted to. Coming along. Here we go. Diesel. Are you really excited also? Diesel boy?
I tried to get the engine running correctly by doing a few more adjustments on the carburetor. Turns out it's just an older style Carter carburetor that's not very reliable. I ended up purchasing a rebuilt Edelbrock 650 CFM carb, and it solved all my issues. So this is the longest that the engine ran on the old carburetor, where I was heavily feathering the choke just to keep it running. The HEMI does just sound amazing with the Flowmaster mufflers, and it was so satisfying to see everything come together and actually work out to have the engine running. I was so happy with how it sounded. I'm so happy that I actually got it running.
Yeah, I was trying to adjust the screws there to kind of keep it going.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I was.
So that like all that oil and everything that's on the engine and shit, right?
Oh yeah, I just cut the screws off there.
Woo! Fucking sound sick.
Yes,
so-
it does.